What if the grains we eat every day were never just food, but the reason entire civilizations took shape? Grains are everywhere. They feed most of the world, shaped the first civilizations, and turned simple seeds into one of the most important forces in human history. But the real story is not just that people grew grain. It is that different grains took root in different parts of the world, and those maps still shape how we eat today. Wheat in one region, rice in another, millet, sorghum, barley, maize, and more. Each one tells a different story about climate, survival, and civilization. So today, we are following the grain map of the world. And by the end of this video, you will see that every major grain has its own origin, its own journey, and its own place in history. Grains are more than just plants. They are the world's most portable calories. At their heart, grains are seeds from grasses, designed by nature to be dry, dense, and tough enough to last through months of storage or journeys across continents. Wheat, barley, rice, millet, sorghum, maize, teff, quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat, and fonio all share this trait. A hard outer shell that protects the energy inside. That is what sets them apart from roots, tubers, or fruits. Potatoes, yams, and cassava might feed millions, but they spoil quickly and are hard to move in bulk. Apples and bananas bruise and rot, and even nuts rarely match the sheer volume and storability of true grains. This story is about those staple grains and grain-like crops, never about spices, herbs, or seasonings. Peppercorns, cinnamon, and cloves may have sparked trade routes, but they never built a city or fed an army. Grains, on the other hand, can be harvested, dried, piled up, and counted. They can be divided for rations, stored against famine, or moved as tribute. That is why ancient villages, armies, and entire tribute systems depended on them. Geography, not politics, decided which grain would thrive where. The climate, the soils, the rainfall, all of these shaped which seeds could be planted, harvested, and stored for the long haul. Before borders or kings, the land itself picked its winners. That is the framework that shaped the world's grain map, and it is the foundation for everything that follows. A harvest only becomes power when it can outlast the seasons. Early farmers faced a simple challenge: how to keep precious grain from spoiling, sprouting, or being eaten before the next crop came in. The answer was storage, and it changed everything. Pit silos dug into the earth, ceramic jars sealed with clay, and the first granaries built from mud, brick, or timber became the world's first real infrastructure. These weren't just places to keep food dry. They were the backbone of survival and the building blocks of something bigger. With storage, the rhythm of life shifted. Instead of wandering or moving camp when food ran out, people could settle in one place. Fixed fields replaced shifting gardens. Predictable harvests meant families could plan for the future, and villages grew around the promise of a steady food supply. The granary became as important as the field itself, a place where the work of many hands could be saved up, counted, and divided. Stored grain smoothed out the hunger of bad years and lean months. It allowed communities to feed more mouths, support children through the winter, and even invite newcomers to stay. Population growth followed the expansion of surplus. The more food could be stored, the larger a settlement could become. Over time, the act of counting and guarding the harvest took on new weight. Someone had to keep watch over the stores, measure out rations, and decide who received what and when. Once grain could be measured, it could also be controlled. The keeper of the granary held real authority. Surplus became a tool, not just for feeding a village, but for shaping its future. The simple act of storing seeds set the stage for the rise of organized communities and eventually the first forms of social power. Grain was no longer just food. It was the foundation for growth, order, and the beginnings of control. Wheat and barley took root in the southern Levant and along the Euphrates corridor, in a land shaped by winter rains and rich, flood-borne soils. Here, wild stands of einkorn, emmer, and hulled barley grew thick after seasonal floods, offering early gatherers a steady, predictable harvest. But the leap from foraging to farming did not happen overnight. Instead, it unfolded through thousands of small decisions, selecting the plumper heads, sowing seeds from the least brittle stalks, and favoring fields where grains ripened evenly. Over generations, these choices transformed wild grasses into crops that stayed on the stalk, held their seeds, and could be harvested in bulk. Charred grains found at Tel Abu Huraira trace the path from gathering to cultivation, showing how people began to plant and tend their own stands of wheat and barley as early as 9,500 BCE. In places like Aswad and Jericho, archaeobotanical evidence reveals the slow march of domestication. Spikelets with tougher joints, grains that no longer scattered in the wind, and fields that could be reaped with simple flint sickles. By 8000 BCE, these cereals had become the backbone of settled life, dependable enough to anchor the first true farming villages. The region's climate and terrain played a decisive role. Alluvial soils, refreshed by river floods, provided fertile ground. Seasonal rainfall meant that fields could be planted and harvested with some predictability. Unlike the wild ancestors, domesticated wheat and barley could be sown in open plots, harvested at once, and stored for the lean months. The ability to generate a surplus, grain that could be saved through the winter, set these crops apart from the roots and wild fruits of earlier diets. In these early villages, grain was more than just food. It was security against drought, a measure of a family's labor, and a resource that could support a growing population. The slow, patient selection of wheat and barley in the Fertile Crescent did not just feed the first farmers, it set the template for how grains would shape the rise of villages, and soon, the world's first states. Once grain could be counted, it could be taxed. That single fact reshaped the ancient world. Unlike roots or fruits, grains could be measured out in baskets or jars, divided into fixed portions and stored for months or years. This made them the ideal currency for early rulers and administrators. In Mesopotamia, temple officials and palace scribes kept tallies of wheat and barley collected from farmers as grain dues. Every harvest, a set share of the crop, sometimes a tenth, sometimes more, was delivered to central storehouses, where it was weighed, recorded, and locked away. These ledgers, often marked with clay tokens or impressed tablets, predate the world's first literature. The earliest writing was not for stories or prayers, but for grain, lists of rations, receipts for barley, records of tribute owed and paid. In Egypt, the state's power flowed through the granaries. Mud brick silos at Tel Edfu and other sites held thousands of tons of wheat and barley, their contents tracked by scribes who stamped receipts and monitored every withdrawal. The units of measure, kor, hekat, or sila, were as familiar to an Egyptian official as liters or bushels are today. These records formed the backbone of the bureaucracy, allowing the pharaoh's agents to redistribute food as wages, pay workers on royal projects, or feed armies on campaign. To control grain was to control the fate of a kingdom. The grain belt itself became a source of political power. The richest cities rose along the rivers and floodplains where harvests were most abundant. The Tigris and Euphrates, the Nile, the Indus, the Yellow River. Whoever held these fertile corridors commanded not just fields, but the ability to collect, store, and move grain over long distances. Caravan routes and river barges linked rural growers to urban centers, turning surplus into taxation and taxation into authority. The daily work of the scribe, counting sacks, recording shipments, and tallying tribute, built the first administrative states. Granary managers, temple accountants, and royal inspectors became the architects of order. Their ledgers mapped the flow of grain from field to storehouse, from storehouse to table, from surplus to state. In this way, the humble act of counting grain laid the foundation for writing, bureaucracy, and the earliest forms of government. The story of surplus is not just about food security. It is the story of how civilization learned to measure, manage, and rule. Along the lower Yangtze River, Rice became more than a crop. It was the engine behind a new way of life. Unlike wheat and barley, which could thrive on seasonal rain, rice demanded a different approach. Its wild ancestors grew in marshes and floodplains. But once people began to shape the land, they quickly realized that controlling water was the key to bigger harvests. Early evidence from the Shangshan and Hemudu cultures shows communities digging out shallow depressions and guiding water into fields, a practice that would evolve into full-scale paddy farming. By around 7000 BCE, these villagers were not just planting seeds, they were building a landscape, bundling together labor to manage irrigation, and turning wetlands into food-producing engines. Paddy rice changed the social fabric of the Yangtze basin. Fields needed to be flooded, drained, and weeded at just the right times. One family could not do it alone. Coordinated work became the norm. Neighbors dug channels, built ridges, and watched the water levels together. The result was a dense patchwork of villages, each tied to the next by the shared demands of rice farming. These were not bureaucratic states run by scribes and tax collectors. Instead, they were networks of farmers whose survival depended on cooperation and careful timing. Rice's success in the Yangtze was not an imitation of the Near East's wheat and barley story. It was a parallel origin, shaped by the region's unique climate and landscape. Where alluvial soils and monsoon rains met human ingenuity, rice paddies spread across the lowlands, anchoring communities that would eventually give rise to some of East Asia's most enduring cultures. Water, labor, and grain, woven together in a pattern as old as the first paddy field. North of the Yangtze, a different grain story unfolded. The Yellow River basin, with its dry winds and unpredictable rainfall, demanded crops that could thrive on less water and mature quickly in short growing seasons. Here, foxtail millet and broomcorn millet took center stage. Archaeological finds at sites like Sishan and Xinglongwa, dating back as far as 6500 BCE, reveal layers of charred millet grains, evidence of early farmers who favored these hardy plants over more water-hungry cereals. Unlike rice, millet did not need flooded fields or elaborate irrigation. Instead, it could be sown after the spring thaw and harvested before the summer drought, producing a reliable yield even when the rains failed. This northern grain logic shaped not only what people ate, but how they lived. Millet's fast growth and resilience allowed small communities to cluster along the loess hills and river terraces, building up stores that could see them through harsh winters. Over generations, the divide between millet in the north and rice in the south became more than just an agricultural fact, and it became a cultural boundary. Northern cuisine grew around steamed millet cakes, porridges, and flatbreads, while the south remained devoted to rice. This enduring grain split would echo through Chinese history, influencing everything from state formation to the daily rhythms of kitchen and table. Draw a line across Eurasia, and a striking pattern appears. To the east and south, rice dominates. To the west and north, wheat and its relatives hold sway. This divide is not just a quirk of history, it's written into the land itself. The monsoon rains of southern and eastern Asia, paired with warm temperatures and low-lying floodplains, create the perfect conditions for paddy rice. Year after year, the summer downpours recharge rivers and wetlands, letting farmers flood their fields and coax out bumper harvests. Where the monsoon fades and winters turn cold and dry, wheat, barley, and later rye and oats become the grains of choice. These cereals thrive in soils that drain well and can stand up to frost, making them the backbone of diets from Anatolia to northern China and the steppes of Central Asia. Soil chemistry and terrain add to the story. Heavy clays trap water for rice but suffocate wheat roots. Loess soils, fine wind-blown dust, stretch across northern China and Central Asia, ideal for planting wheat and millet. Meanwhile, the rugged hills of Southeast Asia and the Ganges Delta's silty flats favor rice paddies. But environment alone never tells the whole tale. Human choices about labor, irrigation, and risk tilt the balance. Rice fields demand collective effort and precise water management, while wheat and barley fit the rhythms of drier, less predictable climates. The result is a grain map that mirrors the hidden grammar of climate, soil, and tradition, a pattern that still shapes what millions eat today. Across the wide band of Africa known as the Sahel, a different story of grain and ingenuity unfolded. Here, the challenge was not river floods or predictable monsoons, but searing heat, poor sandy soils, and rainfall so unreliable that a season could turn from feast to famine in a matter of weeks. In this environment, two grains, pearl millet and sorghum, were not borrowed from distant lands, but shaped right here through the work and patience of Sahelian farmers. Archaeobotanical finds from Mali and Sudan show domesticated pearl millet appearing by around 3000 BCE, with sorghum following in the same era. These grains did not just survive the Sahel's extremes, they thrived, evolving thicker husks, deeper roots, and the ability to set seed even when the rains failed. This resilience made millet and sorghum the foundation of early West African agriculture. Granaries, sometimes simple earthen pits, sometimes woven baskets, were built to store surplus against the long dry season. When a good year came, these stores allowed families and entire villages to weather the lean months, or to trade grain for salt, copper, or cloth along the trade routes that would one day link the Sahara to the Mediterranean. Unlike the grain stories of the Nile or the Yellow River, the Sahel's surplus was not always vast, but it was reliable enough to support the rise of towns and trading centers. Over centuries, these stores of millet and sorghum helped power the growth of kingdoms like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. In the Sahel, grain was not just a measure of survival, but a source of wealth and political influence. This was not a story of marginal lands borrowing crops from elsewhere, but of a region inventing its own answers, proving that power could grow from the toughest soil if the right seed was chosen and the harvest guarded well. Far above the Sahel, the Ethiopian highlands rise into a world of mist and ridged fields. Here, the grain story takes a different turn. The altitude sits above 2,000 meters in many places, and the soils, often acidic and laced with volcanic ash, challenge most crops. Yet in these highlands, teff, one of the world's smallest grains, has become the backbone of daily life. Unlike the trade-driven millet and sorghum systems of the lowlands, teff is woven tightly into the routines of highland families. Its C4 photosynthetic pathway lets it thrive where the air is thin and the nights turn cold, and its fine roots can draw nutrients from soils that would starve other grains. Teff isn't just a crop, it is the foundation of a food tradition. Every day, families grind the tiny seeds into flour, ferment the batter, and bake it into injera, a soft, spongy flatbread that doubles as plate and utensil. Meals are built around injera, and with it, the taste of the highlands becomes a daily act of identity. In village kitchens, the rhythm of cooking and sharing injera is as constant as the work of tending teff fields on steep slopes and terraced plots. Resilience is not just about climate or calories. Teff's success comes from its fit with the land and the people, able to withstand heavy rains, drought, and even the risk of crop diseases that strike other cereals. Where other grains might promise higher yields or easier harvests, teff endures, season after season, because it belongs to the place and the people who keep its traditions alive. In the highlands, the grain map is written not by empire or export, but by the quiet persistence of farming households and the daily breaking of bread. India's grain story is one of crossroads, not conquest by a single crop. Here, the subcontinent's geography acts less like a wall and more like a crossroads of seeds, farming habits, and food traditions. In the irrigated plains of the north, where the rivers spill out from the Himalayas, wheat and barley from West Asia found a reliable home. These grains, brought by early farmers crossing through Iran and the Indus corridor, flourished in the alluvial soils and predictable winter rains. Yet even in these bread baskets, the story never belonged to wheat alone. Move south and east, and the land changes. The The Deccan Plateau, the western drylands, the rain shadow hills are not places where wheat or rice can always be trusted to yield. Here, the Indian millet family steps to the front. Pearl millet, with its deep roots and thirst for the driest monsoon, thrives in Rajasthan and Gujarat, where annual rainfall might barely reach 300 millimeters. Finger millet, first domesticated in Africa but quickly naturalized in India, grows on the rocky soils of Karnataka and the hill country. Proso millet and foxtail millet, with their short growing seasons, fill in the cracks, ready to be sown and harvested before the monsoon's uncertainty sets in. Kodo, little, and barnyard millets, each with their own niche, take hold where soils are thin, the rains fickle, or the land too poor for other grains to bother. This diversity is not a curiosity, it's a matter of survival in a land shaped by uneven monsoon rains and sharp climate contrasts. While the irrigated fields of Punjab might boast a wheat surplus, a drought year in the Deccan or the tribal heartlands means millet is the insurance policy. These grains store well, resist pests, and can be grown without expensive inputs. For centuries, they have provided the daily bread, or more often, the daily porridge, flatbread, or steamed cake for millions. Even today, millet fields outnumber wheat in many rain-fed regions, and the names of these grains echo in every local cuisine. Across India, the grain map is a mosaic, not a single patch. Wheat and barley hold the river valleys, rice dominates the deltas and humid east, but the millets, pearl, finger, proso, foxtail, kodo, little, and barnyard are the quiet backbone of the drylands. Their resilience, shaped by millennia of adaptation, has allowed India's farmers to match crop to climate, field to food tradition, and harvest to hope. Maize began as a wild grass called teosinte, barely recognizable as the plump golden kernels that fill markets today. Over generations, early farmers in the Bolsas River basin of southwestern Mexico transformed teosintes' tiny, hard seeds into maize, a crop capable of feeding entire cities. The secret was not just in the plant's biology, but in how surplus maize could be stored, measured, and moved. By the time of the classic Maya and later the Aztec Empire, maize was more than food. It was the backbone of tribute and taxation, the very currency of power. In city-states across Mesoamerica, tribute communities owed regular deliveries of maize to their rulers. These were not voluntary gifts, they were obligations tracked by officials and recorded in codices. The Codex Mendoza, compiled in the 16th century, lists province after province sending maize by the ton to the Aztec capital. In the Maya lowlands, carved stelae and glyphic texts show maize ears alongside symbols of tribute and authority, proof that the crop stood at the heart of fiscal life. Granaries in places like Tenochtitlan and Maya centers were not just storage rooms, they were vaults of political power. Maize collected as tribute was stored, counted, and then redistributed to feed armies, support temple rituals, and pay workers. The ability to gather and control these stores gave rulers leverage over both city and countryside. In this system, the true actors were not anonymous eaters, but tribute payers and state organizers, weaving maize into the machinery of empire. Here, a grass became not just a meal, but the fiscal lifeblood of entire civilizations. High in the Andes, the story of staple grains takes a turn that defies easy categories. Here, the thin air and cold nights rule out wheat, rice, and most classic cereals. Instead, Andean farmers turn to crops like quinoa and amaranth, plants that look and act like grains, but are not true cereals at all. These so-called pseudo-grains are not members of the grass family, yet their tiny seeds can be dried, stored, and cooked much like wheat or rice. That made them perfect for the rugged, high-altitude world of the Altiplano, where fields stretch above 3,500 meters and frosts can strike any month of the year. Quinoa and amaranth thrive where few other crops dare. Their deep roots and hardy stems shrug off drought, hail, and thin soils. For ancient Andean societies, this resilience was more than a matter of survival. These crops became woven into every layer of life, from daily meals to the most sacred rituals. Quinoa, with its pale, bead-like seeds, filled storage jars and granaries, providing a reliable reserve against lean years. Amaranth, rich in protein and striking in color, featured in ceremonial offerings and feasts. Both crops played a role in tribute systems, where communities delivered their harvests to local rulers or temple authorities, who then redistributed the stores as food, rewards, or ritual gifts. Unlike the tribute maize of Mesoamerica, Andean pseudo-grains anchored a different kind of state power, one that drew on ceremony and communal labor as much as on raw calorie counts. These seeds, small but mighty, helped knit together highland societies, shaping the rhythms of planting, storage, and celebration. Even today, quinoa and amaranth echo through Andean cuisine and identity, reminders that the grain map is not just a story of grass seeds, but of every plant that could be counted, stored, and shared. Some grains never became global superstars, yet their place on the map is anything but minor. In the cool, damp soils of northern Europe and Asia, barley, rye, and oats carved out their own territory. These grains are built for the margins, fields too cold, acidic, or thin for wheat. Barley, with its short growing season and frost tolerance, became the backbone of ancient beers, porridge, and animal feed from Scotland to Siberia. Rye, able to sprout in sandy or depleted soils, proved essential for bread in places where winters bite hard and summers are short. Oats, once dismissed as a weed, turned into a staple for porridge and a reliable feed for livestock, especially in the clouded hills of the British Isles and the Baltic coast. Some grains thrived not in the valleys, but on the edges. Buckwheat, for example, took root in mountain clearings and poor upland soils from the Himalayas to Central Europe. It is not a true cereal, but acts like one, producing seeds that can be ground into flour for pancakes and noodles where wheat and barley cannot survive. In West Africa, Fonio stands as a champion of the drought edge, a tiny seeded grass that matures in as little as 6 weeks, needing almost no rain. Fonio fields stretch across the Sahel, providing a safety net when other crops fail. Its decline in prominence is not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of changing food systems and market forces. These so-called lost crops are not failures. They are survivors, specialists shaped by centuries of trial and error, kept alive by farmers working the world's hardest lands. Their persistence is a reminder that the grain map is more than a contest of winners and losers. It is a record of adaptation, of people matching seed to soil, and of crops that endure not because they conquer, but because they fit. Supermarket shelves now advertise ancient grains: emmer, farro, spelt, teff, sorghum, millet, quinoa, amaranth, and buckwheat as rediscovered treasures. But the story behind these grains is not about miracle foods or trendy diets. It is about what happens when food diversity narrows and the world leans on just a few crops. For thousands of years, these grains anchored local diets, offering different flavors, nutrients, and ways to withstand drought, flood, or disease. As wheat, rice, and maize took over global fields and markets, many of these older grains faded from view. The modern revival matters not because ancient grains promise superpowers, but because they help restore lost diversity, improve nutrition, and build resilience. When only a handful of crops feed billions, agriculture stands on shaky ground. Bringing back these grains is less about nostalgia and more about protecting the food system's future. Wheat, rice, and maize now stand at the center of the world's food supply, not because they are inherently superior, but because they fit the demands of modern agriculture and trade. Each of these grains offers high yields under the right conditions. Wheat thrives in temperate fields, rice in irrigated paddies, maize in climates ranging from the tropics to the plains. Their success is tied to how easily they can be sown, harvested, and processed with machines. Wheat's gluten makes it perfect for bread. Rice's short, sturdy stalks suit flooded fields. Maize adapts to almost any soil. When industrial mills and global shipping networks expanded, these three crops could be cleaned, milled, and shipped in bulk, outpacing local grains that didn't fit the new systems. Colonial trade routes and later global markets pushed wheat, rice, and maize into regions where they had never been grown before, often replacing older staples like millet, sorghum, teff, or buckwheat. The result is a narrowing of the world's grain diversity, with billions now relying on just three crops for most of their calories. Yet the old grain map still matters. Where wheat, rice, or maize dominate, they often follow the same ecological boundaries that shaped the first farming societies, reminding us that the geography of grain is also a map of civilization, past and present. Today, more than half of all human calories still come from just three grains: wheat, rice, and maize. Yet climate shocks and lost diversity threaten that fragile dominance. As new grains and forgotten pseudo-grains return to our fields, the ancient balance between surplus, taxation, and resilience is being rewritten. The next map of power may depend less on borders and more on which seeds we choose to plant. What grains will shape tomorrow? Share your thoughts below.